In 1963, I was a student of Clara Luper at Dungee High School, and I was a member of the NAACP Youth Council. And Clara Luper is the one who said, we're going to the March on Washington, and I want to take some of my students. And when we arrived in Washington, D.C., I saw people everywhere, from east, west, north, south. And the other thing that I recall, I assumed that the majority of the people would be African Americans, to discover once I got there how diverse the crowd was. I would look at films from that event. I started getting chills knowing that I was part of that. When you attend an event of that magnitude as a child, you are just kind of excited because you're there with so many people. And yes, you knew it was something big, but the historical part of it really came more to life for me after the assassination of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. They started talking about his I Have a Dream speech. And at that time, while I was in Washington for the March on Washington, he delivered a speech. They didn't call it I Have a Dream speech. He was the keynote speaker. So we knew we heard a great speech. You could tell that by the crowd and the way we were clapping at different parts of his delivery. But the words started coming to life for me after his death. Going back was a must for me. All of us that attended in 1963, you would tell yourself, I just have to go back for this 50th celebration. I had the opportunity to do that and to return and participate in the March on Washington. You have a bond with those who did attend in 1963, and all while we were still singing songs and marching in that march and listening to all of the different speeches, when you would meet people and they said, I was there in 1963, and I'd say, I was there in 1963, you had an instant relationship with that person. And you can't describe it, you just have to feel it. And that's what happened with me going back to participate in the March on Washington this weekend. Well, the legacy, I feel like we're going to have to continue with what we started 50 years ago. And I believe we are still examples of what Martin Luther King's dream was back then. We've got to continue the fight. The fight is not over. We are still having to fight for freedom, justice, for everybody, not just for one class. Many times when you start talking about civil rights, you forget we're talking about human rights. And when you stop and look at what was planted 50 years ago, the legacy is that we have to continue with the fight.